All right, guys. Well, welcome to week 4, lesson 2. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Let's go ahead and get started with today. So thank you guys for joining us. Pointers for this week is complete the mid-stack survey. We sent that out. It's on Discord, just helping us out. See how you're doing, okay? If you think I'm putting 100%, I'm putting my heart and soul into it, please let us know. If you think I'm not, then also let us know. Polish off your understanding of React. React, we are finishing up. We finished it up yesterday. So I want you guys to take this time to try to close as many gaps as you can with React, whether it is setting up some time in Dojo Hall with your classmates, whether it's looking at the links that we have here on the schedule to set up those one-on-ones, whatever the case may be, please make sure to do so, okay? So taking a little bit to load. Here are the links up here, right? We can schedule a code review. You can meet with the instructor. You can take a look at the videos that we've already kind of discussed. You can take a look at Dojo Hall if you haven't done so already, okay? Let's see. Get ready for the back end, guys. We're going to start talking about the back end. I want you guys to understand that the way we code the back end is nothing like the front end. It has some similarities, but it's not going to be anything like the front end. And the reason I mentioned this is because I always have the question, hey, I did npx create React app server, but it's not working. Because npx create React app, what it's doing, it's creating the client, it's creating the front end, right? It's what's dealing with the HTML, the JavaScript, the CSS, all that, right? The back end is not, it does not have to do that, right? At least not what we're doing here, okay? And then understand the difference between client-side routing and server routing. This is another big one. This kind of gets brought up a lot because you're going to see different routes. And some of you guys have probably already noticed when we do an Axios request, you'll notice that the route is not the route on the top of the page, right? And that's the first kind of bit of confusion that I sometimes get is students will tell me, hey, I noticed that we have a different route on the top of the page than what you're doing the Axios request with, right? Is that a problem? What does it mean? Why are you doing this routing with Axios and this other routing with React? Well, the reason being is we are doing kind of like let's say a fake kind of routing, because if you remember, React is going to show components and hide components according to this route, but it's not going to make calls to the API, right? They're disconnected. Now, for those of you guys coming from another stack, like maybe Python, Java, we have server-side rendering, right? And now, of course, if you're using Next.js, server-side rendering as well, right? So if you came from one of those stacks, you're gonna be like, why do they only have one route and we have two routes here? Because you came from a stack that was doing all of the rendering server side, meaning that one route did all of the work that it needed to do for the not only the client side but the server side. Now we have a disconnect. We have one folder for the server, we have another folder for the client. So there's different routes. What does this mean? Well, the front routes are going to make the application look snappy. We're not referring to a server. So we're not saying, hey, let me send some information to the server, then the server is going to get back to me with my HTML page and the CSS and all these things, right? We already have it. So it's going to pop up whatever page, and it doesn't have to wait. It's only going to wait for the data, but you'll see this when you go to pages, like let's say YouTube, you click on YouTube and you see a skeleton of the web page. You don't see the data, but you see a skeleton. Why? Because the skeleton is that initial, that client side. Really quickly, you have it, it's there on your side, and the things are taking a little bit to load, but the app looks really quick, right? It's moving quick. Why? Because there's that disconnect. We're waiting for the server for data, but we can already render information for the user that's there, right? So you'll see a loading, you'll see something loading or something like that, right? But the page itself looks very snappy, okay? So do understand that we're using two different routes. We're not using one route like server-side rendering, we're using two different routes. One to do the routing to change to a different page or component, and another one to actually get the information from the API, okay? Yes, it's like giving the menus before the food. Yeah, very good. Nice little comparison there. So yes, so that being said, let's go ahead and get to our housekeeping. We covered React routing last time. This pretty much ends our React section and begins our backend, right? So if we take a look at the schedule, right, we can see where we're at. We have this nice little highlighting. Okay. And so you can see where we're at here, right? So we noticed that React routing was the last day was yesterday. Now we start talking about Express, right? And then we say, okay, MongoDB, full stack Mern. Okay, cool. So hopefully you can see this is going to be the backend, right? And then we do the full stack. Okay. So this is the reading that you would have to complete. We talk about Express, we talk about Postman. We'll be covering that here today. The folder structure we'll cover a little bit later. I believe tomorrow we can look at I think tomorrow we'll take a look. Actually, it might not be tomorrow, it might be next week because we have to tie everything together for that folder structure of actually breaking things up into little pieces, right? Modularizing the app instead of having everything on one single page. But that being said, this is the reading that we have. And today we'll be talking about, we'll be using Express and we'll be looking at kind of routing in the backend, okay? And then kind of creating an API. And that being said, that's essentially what we're going to cover here today. Then coming up next week, we have MongoDB, and we're going to start getting to the full stack Mern. And then look what's coming up. We have that exam sent out, okay, after that week, right? So we're getting pretty close, right? We're tying things up. So take this time to tie up React and get started with that backend, okay? Do understand there's going to be differences. There's going to be syntactical differences as well that I want you guys to catch, okay? Cool. All right, so that being said, let's go ahead and continue moving forward. Just kind of thinking of our good things. I know sometimes we get stuck on things. Sometimes we're coding for, a lot of time. I would love to say just 6 hours, but honestly, we all know that coding does not just take 6 hours. It takes a lot of time. Okay, so you'll be coding for quite some time, whether it's straight 6 hours straight, or it's 3 hours here, 2 hours here, 1 hour here, 30 minutes here, 20 hours here, 5 minutes here. So sometimes this happens. And so you'll get stuck on things, you'll get tired. I want you guys to remember, right, what the reason you're doing this. Okay. That big why that we talked about. And quote for today is going to be, if you are determined to learn, no one can stop you. Okay. There's our quote for today. So starting off with our warm-up questions for today. A few warm-up questions here, 3 warm-up questions. How do we pull the parameters from a URL with React Router? What is the hook used to navigate programmatically? What is the correct way to structure the router? Right, add a component home with a path of a /, right? How do we get there? So that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Let me see if I can pull up some lo-fi. I know we had some lo-fi. I think it's this one. There we go. These are the 3 questions. And when I mean navigate programmatically, it's using JavaScript, right? What do we use? What is the hook used to create that navigate? In case you haven't seen the link on Discord, having some problems there, let's go ahead and send this off. And you know what I didn't do? I didn't help you guys out. I'm so sorry. I forgot about that. This one, I think it's this one. There we go. right, guys, make sure we get a response. We try it out. We work hard at this. Let's take a look at some of those responses. Nice. Use params. Use navigate. Okay. All right, all right, all right. Destructure. Use params. Nice. I like that. Use navigate. Browser router. Routes. Route. Yes. Very good. Yep. So you guys struggling a little bit? Take a look. Take a look. All right, take a look. Take a look. And we have to destructure out the key we need. Good, good, good. Nice. All right, cool, cool. Why is it that I always have to end the music on like a really good song? It's always a good song. All right, so let's go ahead and then we'll get started with today. Sorry, lo-fi. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with today, guys. Welcome, welcome. Thank you guys for being here today. Really good answers here. I think you guys did really well. Destructuring out and showing how we can set that up using navigate. Absolutely correct. We're using navigate. We say const navigate is equal to use navigate. That's how we're able to set that up. And then this is correct. Yeah, very good. All right, so let's go ahead and start talking about need to know. Just a little bit of information here, right, that I think is super important. Propaganda didn't go unnoticed. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. So what is a server, right? A web server, API server, RESTful routing. Somebody here, in your opinion, you can send it in the chat. You can unmute. What is a server? What are you thinking? What's a server?
It's almost like the brains.
I like that.
The brains
like
of project.
that. Sebastian?
Yeah.
Nice, right? So it's almost like the brains, right? It's like the brains. It has the logic. It's going to do something, right? Do you guys normally have, well, some of you guys might, I don't know. Who here has a server at home and it's running their web page? Yeah, some of us, right? Some of us have maybe a Raspberry Pi, right, which has a little server, and we're running our web page. Or some of you guys might have a big computer, right?
Oh, I lied. No, I don't. Never mind. I don't see. I don't even know.
No, but the Raspberry Pi, we can definitely have like a server running. So some people do. They have a little Raspberry Pi, and their web page is on that server, which is really cool. Sometimes people create their own games and stuff, and they have a little server kind of running at their home, and that's what serves their applications. All kinds of really crazy stuff, right? But a lot of times we're going to see that servers are also found somewhere else, right? And that's exactly it. Robert Teets says it's a server is a computer. It takes requests and response. Absolutely correct, right? It could be a computer, right? It could be a computer here at home, right? That you set up to be a server, right? Or it could be a computer somewhere else. It could be at AW, or it could be at Amazon, right? It could be one of Google servers. It could be a server across the world. Somebody else has a huge building full of servers, and they charge rent, and you can pay them, right, to rent their server, rent a little piece of that computer, right, so that you can have your web page there and stuff, right? That's essentially all it is. So we have different servers, right? We have web servers, API servers, and then we talk about RESTful routing, CRUD. We talk about Postman, right? So essentially a server is a computer. It's a computer somewhere, right? And we have different ways of receiving information from them, right? Sometimes we have like a web server, which is kind of client side, what we call it, where some of you guys have been kind of accustomed to seeing client side, where all the information, all the routing and everything happened on the server, and then that gave you the web page that you needed. Now we're kind of playing with an API server where we have two separate kind of components, right? Or folders, I guess you would say. Parts to it, you would have your client side, and then you're reaching out to an API, which is an API server, which essentially what it does is you're able to see these different endpoints, right? So it opens up these endpoints that you can retrieve information with, or that you can send information through. These endpoints live in the server, And then you have your front end, which is making these requests, right? So we kind of get to the what is WRRC, kind of not WWE, right? But what is WRRC? So what do you guys think that is? Send it in the chat if you know WRRC, right? When we start talking about servers, this becomes very important. What is WRRC, right? WRRC, what do we think this is? What are we thinking? WRRC. I'm going to give you a hint. It starts with web request. Nice, Mr. Teets. Web request response cycle, right? And that's what we see back here, right? We can see that cycle that we see. We have our server, right? Which is that computer, which is housing the logic that can talk to the database. It can get back information from the database. Whoa. I can get back from the database, all this information, right? So now you see a different kind of setup here. You see routes, you see controllers and models. We'll talk about this a little bit later, so we'll get more into these specific ones. But essentially, what I want you to think of is we have this web request response cycle. We request information from the server. It goes to a specific route. This route is now going to the controller. It's going to control things. The controller's like, okay, this is what I need to do when they go to this route. I need to reach out to the database. I need to create something. Maybe I need to get something. And then I'm going to follow a set of rules. That's what we're going to call our models. Okay. We're going to dive a lot deeper into these later, but that's just kind of the gist of it for now. Okay. Once the controller decides what we're going to do, right, it's going to say, okay, this is what we need to do. It sends a response. Okay. That response is going to be received. The response is going to be in JSON. Now, this is very familiar, right? As you guys can remember, we essentially did already talk to a server, right? Which is an API. We had different APIs that we played with. We played with the Pokemon API. Some of you guys played with the Star Wars API. There was another API that the one that sent very literal strings, right? String meal. And when we played with our desserts, we had an API, right? So essentially it's we're reaching out to an API, but now it's going to be a custom API. It's going to be an API that you make, that you create. The cool thing about this is if you remember talking to another API, right, when we talked to these APIs, they didn't really allow us to update their information, right, or delete something from their database. It was just a plethora of information, right? Now, when you make your own custom API, you'll be able to not only save information, create information, you'll be able to update information and delete information, right? So you have a lot more power than you did with just regular API getting information there, okay? Or at least the ones that we talked to. There's other APIs that you'll get to use that you'll be able to have some functionality like that. Okay, and then this kind of runs into Postman. Okay, cool. So I know what a server is. I know, I know what an API is. I know that we've been talking to APIs. I know that we're going to create essentially an API instead of being a web server where everything is rendered server side. So next we get to Postman. So why is Postman important, right? So Postman is going to allow us to be able to essentially do what the client's doing without having to create the client. Well, what does this mean? That means I don't have to work my butt off to try to create a React app and set everything up correctly, right? So that it can send that request correctly, right? Why is this important? Well, imagine you have a very large application that you need to create all these components. You start creating these components, you start styling them, you want to do all these things. The thing is that takes time. And sometimes you want to make sure that this is working before you get this working. Okay. So that being said, we're going to use Postman to do that, right? So Postman will allow us to be able to do just that. Now, you might say, well, can't I just do this using my browser, right? Because we did something very similar, right? When we reached out to these different APIs, we said, hey, I want to get some information from the Poke API. All right, all I did was put it in my URL and it gets the information. Okay, cool. So it gets the information. That means I should be able to make these requests to the server, right? Well, let's take a look at Postman, right, real quick. So we used it yesterday in office hours. We were talking about Faker API and one of those assignments. We'll use it today real quick. I'm going to go ahead and get the information from this location. I want you to notice this is exactly this, right? This is this, but it's not a browser, right? It's nothing like that. right? It's just getting the information. It's giving me more information that was found in the headers. 200 okay, status of okay, we're good. The body, this is the information that was sent back to me. Fantastic, right? I know that I was able to get the information. Cool. It even allows me to save, right? To save these different URLs so that I can have access to them later. I can use them later and I can say, okay, cool. This is the one that I had to get the Pokemon. This is the one that I had for this, right? So on and so forth. Now, here's the problem with using it in the browser, okay? We're going to start playing with our server and we're going to set up what is called RESTful routing. Okay, so the question, what the heck is RESTful routing? Right, what the heck is that? Well, let's take a look at what RESTful routing is. Let's see, where is it? Is it here? No, I think it's here. I think it was here. Which one was this one? Let's see what this one was. This one was for, nice, okay, cool. So this is RESTful routing. When we set up our route, what is it? Yeah, essentially this one. So when we set up our route, we have these different verbs, these HTTP verbs. When we use these verbs, they're going to be used for something in particular, right? So when we see Postman, and if you haven't downloaded Postman, please do so right now while I'm having this conversation, so you can use it today. When you see Postman, you can see that you can actually change these verbs. You can change get, post, put, patch, delete, copy, head, options, link. You can do all of these. We're not worried about all of these. We're just worried about get, post, put, and delete. In fact, we're not even using patch, okay? So we'll be using those. Now let's take a look at what those mean. If we're using a get verb, what that means is that I want to get information, right? I didn't want to zoom in, but that's okay. I want to get information, right? I'm going to either get one item that maybe I have saved in the database, or maybe I'm going to get many items that I saved in the database, right? Let's see if I can bring this down. Oh, I think that's did the opposite. What is going on here? Let's see, reset, maybe refresh. Let's try refresh, see if that, I think I did something with my mouse here. There we go. All right, so the next one that you might see is we have, so create, read, update, delete. The next one, the first one was create. How do we create something? Well, we use a HTTP verb called post. When we use post, we're able to send a body of information, right? And in that body of information, we'll be able to send the information that we need to have our server be able to make either a user, some sort of item, whatever the case may be, essentially save some information to the database, okay? And then we have update. The update is going to be happening through the verb put, okay? It's going to update particular set of information. And then we're going to have delete, which we all know, delete, destroy, right, gone, bye-bye. That's what we're going to be using to delete information. And some of you guys will see that there's put and there's patch. Patch is not on here, but we'll be using put, right? And I got this really good article about the difference between put and patch. Essentially, that put is going to replace all the information, where patch kind of only gets one little piece of information and is able to just replace that one little piece of information, okay? We'll be using put, okay? So that's all you have to remember. Create, read, update, delete. Create, you create using a put, or not a put, a post. The reading you do with a get. The updating you do with a put, and the deleting you do with delete. Well, why is this important? Why did you say we needed to see this and we're not going to understand because we see this and you see these here? Why can't I still use the browser? Well, somebody tell me why I can't use the browser. What does the browser do by default when I put a endpoint here? What does it do? Which one of these verbs do you think it's using by default? Nice, nice, Jonathan and Saad, really quick. Answers, it is using get. So when I do something here, I'm just getting information from the Poke API. Okay, I'm just getting information. So this will get information, but when we start creating our own APIs, it's not just going to get information. You're going to want the full credit functionality, right? The creating, the reading, the updating, the deleting. Okay, we're going to want all of that. So how are we going to make that happen? We're going to be using Express. Okay, so taking a look at Express. Express is a package that we're going to use. This is going to make it a lot easier for you to set something up to say, okay, I want to listen, right, for a GET request to this particular path, and then I want you to run this function. All right, it's going to make it very easy to set this whole thing up. Okay, this is Express. Well, where's Express going to be working? Well, Express is going to be working on Node.js. Well, what's Node.js? Node.js is a JavaScript runtime. Okay, why is this important? Well, JavaScript only runs where? Can anybody tell me? Where's JavaScript running? JavaScript is mainly built to be run where? In the browser. Absolutely correct. It's built to be run in the browser. So how do we solve it being able to be run somewhere else? Well, we create a JavaScript runtime. And that's what Node.js is. That's what allows you to be able to use JavaScript outside the browser to do all these really cool things. Okay, so we'll be using Node.js. This is already installed. Hopefully we all have this installed already. It should be, honestly. If you just type in Node, I think it's like space dash V, I think it's for version. Just Google it real quick, Node version, and you should see a command. Okay. Awesome. So that's what we're using here today, right? We'll be using Express to set everything up, to be able to set up those routes, those endpoints essentially that we can send different requests using different verbs. Okay. And that's essentially it, right? And that's essentially all that we're doing. It looks very complex here in the picture, but honestly, it's not, right? We have Node.js, which is allowing us to run JavaScript. We have our Express server, or we're creating a server in Express. Express makes it a lot easier to type this all out. You're able to listen to different requests coming in with different verbs, and then do whatever it is that you need to do with that information. Okay. Essentially, that is that. Now, let's actually see this coded out, right? Because yeah, it's all great and dandy to hear about it, but let's see what happens, how this works, and how we would create this. Okay. All right. So we'll be using this a little bit later. Just want to make sure this is not here. Set something up here, localhost. We'll just do API. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and get started. So I want to once again mention, I did not do an npx create React app. This is no longer the client side. This is the backend. This is the server. So all you have to do is create a folder server. And actually, I didn't create one here. So I'll just do one so that you can see. Essentially, it's inside of a folder that should be server, but that's okay. I'm going to show you guys how it should look. Why? Because later, you're going to have your client like this. This is how it's going to look. You're going to have a client, you're going to have your server. This will house your React app. This will house your backend, the API. Okay. So we're going to open up the server. We have nothing there, but we have to install some dependencies so that we can get everything working using all of these technologies that we said we were going to use. Okay. All right, cool. So let's wait for the terminal to open. I'm waiting. As you guys know, my computer's super slow. So it takes a little bit for this terminal to load, and then we'll start typing. So give me a moment. Probably give me a quick water break and answer any questions you guys may have at this point. If you raise your hand, it'll send you to the top so I can answer those questions. And also, I did want to, what was I going to say? I was going to mention something about questions. Oh, I did want to mention, please give us a 1 or a 0 real quick in the chat on this little explanation, see how we're doing right now. Cool, very cool. Nice, nice. Feeling good, feeling good. Nice, cool. All right, very good. All right, so if we're still at 0.5, and even though we were a little afraid maybe we didn't want to send it in, that's okay. Hopefully with this little bit where we actually code it, you'll be able to understand a little bit better, okay? So we can see client and server. Like I said, you have to be inside the folder where you're going to do all of the work, right? So we have the server.js, which is that folder or file that's inside of my folder server. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to do npm init-y, okay? You're going to initialize npm node package manager for it to manage the packages that we're going to be installing. The -y is just to say yes to everything, right? Kind of like when your phone says, hey, do you agree to all these conditions? And you're like, yeah, I agree. I don't even know what I'm signing, but I agree, right? This is exactly what's going on here, okay? We're doing -y for I agree to everything. All right, cool. So it sets everything up, and some changes that you're going to see me do from the get-go, which is kind of like a pet peeve of mine, to keep Node here because Node doesn't do us any good, because it doesn't refresh when we make changes. So I always change this to Node1. And if this on your side says index.js, just change it to server.js because that is the name of this. Okay. Cool. And you might not be seeing me click save. It is saving. So I just want you guys to know this is always saving. Okay. All right, cool. So now we can go ahead and start typing. We could start typing a few things, right? Well, we could start typing, but I would probably say that's incorrect because I'm going to start trying to use things that I don't have. Now, we talked about a few things that we were going to need. We said I need to install something, and we have to make sure we're inside of the server, which we are. I said I need to install. We're going to be using Express. Okay, so we need to install Express. That's the first thing. Okay, so make sure you do npm install Express. Later, you'll be installing a few other things. And in fact, just to kind of help us out with maybe some data, right, we could always go back and say, hey, I know that there's this really cool thing called Faker API that can get us some information. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this so that we can use it. And then we'll paste it here. And we're going to install that too. I'm going to send this out once again so you guys have it. So you guys have this this link so you could find that. We're just going to install it. Okay. And we could read the documentation on how to use it. We'll use it a little bit later, okay? So let's import it according to the documentation. We will use it later, but I'm going to import it now because imports go at the top, okay? So once again, I just went here. I know that there's something called Faker that's going to give me fake data. We might use this later. First, we'll start creating our own information. Then later, we'll use this information, right? And then the reason we did save dev, it's going to save it as a developer dependency, meaning that you need it as a developer for fake data, but honestly, nobody else is going to need it. Okay. We're going to wait. Like I said, my computer's super slow. And one of these days it's going to crash when it's doing this. Watch. Let's just hope it's not today. All right, cool. And so making the terminal small again. And we're going to go ahead and paste this here. For those of you guys that already played with this, you know that this is not going to work. You have to say const, and then you have to say require. Is going to equal require, and then that'll work. Okay. All right, cool. So let's take a look, see if there's any questions. No. Okay, cool. All right, so let's set up this server, right? So all we have to do is we're going to say const express is going to be equal to require. And actually, we'll just do it like this, express. Go to the end. And then we're going to do one more thing. We're going to say const app is equal to express. Okay. Cool. This is kind of like the initial little setup. And there's one more thing that I like to add here. I say const of port is equal to 8. Oh. Okay. All right, kind of like that first little setup. Okay. This, what is this doing? Well, this is just importing the things I need. All right, nothing too crazy, just things I need. So then you can start setting things up. So we can look at the documentation, right? We can say, okay, well, where's Express? Express tells me this. It says to set this up. This is directly from the documentation. I'm not making this up. I'm not like, you need to remember this. This is something special. This is something special. No, you look at the documentation, it already gets everything kind of set up for you. Okay. This is exactly what we're going to do. Okay. A little different, but pretty much exactly. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna say, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say, I want you to, well, it's not gonna listen yet. It'll listen at the end. I want you to be listening to a GET request to API. Because then the common naming convention, right, that you're gonna see when you're referring to an API is in the URL, you're going to type API, right? This is just to let developers know. It's not going to change things. It's not going to make things different, but it's just to let a developer know they're having a conversation with an API. You also might see something like V3 or V2 or V1. That is just the version of the API. Okay. For now, because it's annoying to type it, I'm not going to put V1. Okay. I'm just going to put API so that we can see what happens. after it receives a request to, and it has to be a GET request to API, it's going to say, okay, I'm going to do something, right? I'm going to run this arrow function that takes a request and a response. Okay. And then just really easy for now, let's just response.json. And we're going to respond with the message. And that's just going to say, hello world. All right. We're missing one more thing at the end, app.listen. This kind of starts it listening, making sure that thing, that it's listening on this specific port. What port do I want to listen to? I'm going to say the port because we already set it to be 8,000. And then my function is going to be an arrow function that all it does is going to console log, and it's going to say, do some backticks. I love saying locked and loaded on port. Money sign to do that string interpolation, and then port. Okay. Nothing too crazy, right? Pretty simple little setup.
Just a question that Christian is asking, the appfaker-js/faker, any difference from just faker? I believe it's all from the same database. It's just not same database. Well, same company is making it, but I guess they have different means of like accessing the information.
Yeah.
Robert.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Yeah, it's the same people that are making it, but you're going to notice that there's some errors with some of them. So once you go to the documentation, I think it's here, you can actually access the other one that's just faker. This one is telling you add faker-js/faker, and this is how you would use it. This is actually a little bit incorrect. The other one that is just faker, when you use that one, you're referring to this one, right? And if you'll notice when I open this up, you're going to see something very similar. All right. Let's see, where is it at? Come on, is it not here? Oh, this went to the versions. I think it's on the README. Or is it on the README? Okay, well, it says repo. If you click on the repo here for the package, oh, they changed it. Okay, cool. So there were some problems here with, I believe, one of their creators that created Faker. I guess there was some things that happened in the company. Not entirely sure. I'm not going to give you a story that's incorrect, but I know something happened within the company that caused one of the workers to send out an incorrect update that was there to just kind of have people try to use Faker, and it doesn't work for them. Right, as you can see, 87,000 people have tried to use it and it's not working for them. They probably got upset and tried to find a different technology that did the same thing. All you have to do if you're using just Faker is you have to make sure that you install the 5.5.3 version using the @ symbol. So you would say install npm install Faker at 5.5.3 for it to work. And then if you're using this other one, it's just a different naming convention. Where's the other one? Just a different naming convention. I believe with just the Faker, you don't need to do this right here with the curly braces. I might be incorrect. You might still have to. But as far as I know, that was the only real main difference. Also, they don't have, if you're using Faker, it doesn't have access to all of these methods that they have saved. So honestly, I would use this one. This is the more updated version, right? This one's been updated correctly, and it has, all the documentation that you need of what you need to use. So, yeah.
Yeah, 666 is the fake faker.
Yes, that's correct.
666 is
the fake
it's
faker.
on purpose that it was 666.
Play on words. Is that a pun? It's a fake faker. Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, that's a fake one. So use this one. We just need to make sure that we're not importing. We don't do it that way. We set up a const faker is equal to require. Okay. And it will even give you some errors here. It will say file is a common JS module. It may be converted to ES module. Don't worry about that. Just set it up like this. So that being said, let's go ahead and kind of take a look at how this is working, right? It was definitely offline for sure. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happens when we run this. So remember, I made a change here to the package.json. I said, okay, I'm going to make a change. Kind of a pet peeve of mine is that this says node instead of nodemon. Node will not update. So when I start typing things in the code, and if I'm running the server will not update. It will not listen to changes. And so it'll just keep the old code running. And sometimes you'll run into errors and you think that you fixed it, but you did fix it. But because it's still using the old code, it won't fix on your side, and you'll get a big headache, and then you'll wonder what's going on. Okay. All right. So that being said, yeah, Carlos, that's a good question. Sorry, I just saw that in the chat. I don't know. That's a good question. So let's go ahead and we're inside of the server. We're going to do npm start, and we're going to see what happens, right? We're going to do npm start. Let's take a look at what happens. I should have cleared this out so that we can see, but because my computer takes forever, I don't think I should clear it out now. All right, so waiting for this to do its thing. As you can see, it's using nodemon. It ran the command nodemon server when I did npm start. And then it says locked and loaded on port 8000, right? This tells me that it's working. Okay, it's working, it's locked and loaded port 8000, it's listening for information. And now I can go here to the postman and I can get information. Well, let's see what it sends to me. It's going to say message hello world. Perfect, right? We just created our server, the first part of our server, right? Hello world, right? So congrats on that. This is a big achievement right here, okay? All in itself. Now, let's take a look at what happens if I use these different verbs, right? We will see something happen. If I try to post, it's going to say an error. Cannot post to this endpoint. Okay, can I put send? Sorry, you cannot put to this endpoint. You'll even say 404, give you all the information. Why is that? Can anybody have a guess on why that is? Did I just code something incorrectly, or maybe there's something that I typed out? Very good, son. Good catch. Because app.get is only listening for the verb get. So guess what's going to happen if I change this to maybe put or maybe post, right? Notice it's changing, so we have to wait. Let's see what happens if it's changing and it and yeah, so it's changing, couldn't connect to the server because my server was still reloading, meaning my server wasn't actually running. You might get this error. It says econ refused, connection refused, right? It was not able to connect. That's essentially what it's saying. After it's been connected, obviously we're going to get an error because we changed it from get to something else. And now when we run it, the correct verb, we get back the message hello world. Essentially what this is showing you is that this has something that it's requiring. It's requiring the verb to be exactly, right? So we're going to change it back to get, okay? API. When I see this request come in, it's a get request to this endpoint, run this piece of code, okay? That's essentially what's happening here, okay? Nothing too crazy. So let's go ahead and start kind of playing with not full CRUD, but just start understanding what's happening, right? So we have create, we have read, we have update, and we have delete, okay? So for create, when we're creating something, if we remember, and if we don't remember, we could say, it's using the specific routing. Where is it? Where's the routing? So many tabs, I know. We need a specific verb to be able to create. Nice, create, post. Okay, cool. So that means it has to say app.post. And then I could say, okay, it's gonna post to this specific endpoint. And then because I am efficient and I don't want to wait, I'm gonna go ahead and just do this right here. I want to type this all out. Okay, efficiency. I'm going to go ahead and put message. This is my read. Cool. So doing the same type of thing because I'm efficient and I don't want to type this whole thing out. Read, right? Update and delete, right? We already have this one for get we don't want this to get confused with the other ones. So we're just going to delete it. Okay. Create is a post. Reading is a get. Updating is a, anybody? Oh no. What is the updating? Okay, put, very good. So this is updating. Calm down, sir. Put, create, read, update, and delete. We all know this one. Delete. Okay. All right. So now we have to change one more thing because it could be confusing, right? This is my create. No, it's not. This is my read. Okay. This is my update. This is my delete. Okay. So these are the endpoints that I was talking about, right? When you're talking to an API, we reached out to the API, we reached out for some specific information, and it did some work in the background. We didn't know, right? It was a black box. We couldn't see inside of it. We knew how we needed to call it, how we needed to request information. That's all we knew, right? But now we get to actually see the inner workings of an API by you creating an API. Now you can create an API in another language as well. You can use like Django, you can use Python, or you can use Flask, different ways. You can use Java, right? Essentially, we're doing this one using Express, Node, JavaScript, right? So we're going to go ahead and test this out. We have this specific endpoint, and let's see, get. This is my read post. This is my create. Put. This is my update and delete. This is my delete, right? So hopefully what we're seeing here is there's a pattern, right? We have this route, and then we have a different verb. Notice that the verbs are the ones that are changing, right? The verbs are the ones that are changing, and the endpoint is remaining the same, right? On all of these. Why can we do that? How can we do that? This is confusing. Well, not really, because we can use that same endpoint. We're just using a different verb. So we want to do something different, not the last one, but delete, put, get, so on and so forth. Now there's going to be one that's a little bit different, obviously. It might not be as obvious now, but we might later when we read, sometimes we don't want to read all of them. We want to read a single one. And so that's when you would see something like this, right? If the endpoint is API with something at the end, that's going to be the parameters that's going to be my ID. We can use that later, right? And so, right, this is kind of our initial setup, right? All right, cool. So now that we see how these, we've exposed this API, we were able to call or request information from these different endpoints. Let's take a look at actually doing some logic inside of here, okay? All right, so the first one is gonna be the create, right? And when we're creating things here, we're going to post, right? And if you already have this up, hopefully everybody has this up. And if you don't, just pay attention, make sure you download it. We need to make sure that we set this up, not here, sorry, to the body to be, where is it? Raw JSON. We're going to send our body in raw JSON. Okay. All right, cool. And when we're creating, we want to send some information. So I'm just going to say that we're going to receive a name. We'll say Bob. We'll receive an email saying bob@mymail.com. And an email, maybe a password. Password is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to notice these are underlined, right? We might be used to key value pairs. This is JSON. JSON is a string. String. Oh. Oh. Okay, cool. So that information is going to be received when we create. So if I do a post, I'm going to receive it in my request. What do I mean by this? Well, if I console log the request dot body upon the post, Still going to send some JSON back, right? A response. Oh, not Zoom. Zoom's already open. Okay. If I do a post, send some information over. All right, hold up. Still doing its thing. Sorry. You're gonna see something else happen too. So when I send this over, I say messages to create. Let's see if it console logged anything. Oh no, a console log undefined, right? What do you mean? I sent over the body. Well, if you look up, and I think it's already here on Express. Where's Express? Express, is it under Express? Okay, maybe it's not under Express. We have to set up an app.use, and we're using JSON. This little section is one that throws me off. The app.use. Let me take a look real quick. Quick little search. And see in the chat, see if anybody sent that off. App.use. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Teets. Express.json. All right, cool. And I can go ahead and add all of these. Awesome. We'll add, oh, I copied the wrong thing. There we go. All right, cool. We'll set this up right now. When I do this, same thing. I still give back the same response. Oh, well, it's doing its thing. Give it a second. Give it a second. Let's see. Oh, did I close the terminal? No, there it is. All right. When I do it now, we see still the same response, but then you see here a object. Name Bob, email bob@mymail.com, and a password. So I receive the information because I had to set this up and configure it to use express.json. So it's able to use JSON. Okay. This is for URLs that are encoded. We honestly, I don't think use these at all, but still keep that on there, right? So that being said, we just received information to post, to create a user. We're not tied to a database just yet, right? We haven't added a database, but essentially you can now see how I can get some information and then maybe talk to a database, right? And say, hey, I need you to save this information, right? Inside of the database. Okay, cool. So we have a few other ones here. So we've seen how we can receive information, right? Now we can get information. Well, quick question for everybody here, right? Kind of a little thought how we can do something with this information. It's a object. If I'm trying to get some information here, what can I do? Being that there's no API here, just a quick dirty little fix so that we can save these users to some data, some structure, so we can run the app.get to API and receive that information. What do you guys think? Any ideas?
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, so let's say we're not tied to a database. I'm already sending over an object, right? How could I probably save some information right now, just so that when we use the app.get, we can receive some information? Any ideas? Okay, state. What about
Yeah, it's
state? Where does
like a
state
variable.
Where does state live? Where does state live? State is in React, right? State, we're using React, and this is not React. This is the backend. Remember, I said it's a little bit different, right? You're gonna see different nomenclatures. You're gonna see different syntax. It is not the front end. Please do not confuse it, okay? So we're just gonna create an array, and so that we can push the users into the array. And then when they do get, what I'd like to do in the JSON, I would like to see if I can send over users. We'll try users, and we'll send over my array. We'll see if we can just do it like that. Let's see. All right, let's see, API. Yeah, cool. All right, let's try it out, see if it works for us. So we're gonna go ahead and send some information, posting the user, still doing its thing because it's slow, that's okay. Okay, do it again. All right, so this is my create. I created somebody. Now we've created it. Let's create another one. We'll say Bill. We'll send it off. And then we'll do get. And then we'll see if we can get some data. So now we see users, and then we see an array, and then we see these different users that we just created. Okay. We're not using a database right now. Essentially, this will be saved into our database, right? So we save into our database because if I restart the server, these will be erased. Okay. All right. So we have different routes. We're receiving information, right? It's sending out a message. Later, you might actually or send in JSON the actual user that you just created, right? User. After they've been created, we'll just send request.body again. And then let's see how that looks. So we're waiting for this to happen. Waiting. Okay. All right, going back. And so we're going to go ahead. Let's see what happens if I try to get some information. The server restarted, deleted everything from that array, right? Because it restarted. Okay. And we have to make sure that we create some more. So we're going to send Bill over. And now look, it says user Bill, almost like this, almost the same way that you're going to see data being received back later whenever you create a user, but when you return it, you're actually going to see an ID and stuff and all kinds of other information. Okay. All right. So I know we're kind of extending the time just a little bit, but I wanted to, cover all of these, and just a quick look at kind of what we wanted to work on. And I'm gonna do one with Faker API. So give me just a second. Let's take a look at the assignment. It's saying create a server, open up Postman, npm init, use Faker, and a route to get users and a route to create users. So we're creating users already with Postman. But if you wanted to use something such as Faker, what you could do here, instead of, the app.post here and then doing some information like this and actually receiving information from the request.body, we could just say myArray.push, and we can say, I want you to push an object. And how are we going to create that object? We're going to say const object is equal to name. Okay. And then we can go back here to the Faker information. We can say, okay, I just need these two right here. Well, we need password too. So let's take all of these. Let's just take all of those. Okay. And I can say, okay, I'm just going to paste it here. And when it creates it, it's going to push it and it's going to send the user, and that's going to be the object. A cool object. And then we're going to get our users. Okay, if everything is set correctly, we should be good to go. Did I already import Faker? Yeah, should be good. All right, so how does this help? Well, let's go ahead and post. All right, go ahead and post. Oh no, it's still doing this thing. It takes forever. Sorry. Come on. Okay, cool. So we're gonna post. Okay, look at the user it created, right? Look at the information, look at the data. I didn't have to type anything in, right? Okay, I'm gonna send it again, right? Send it again. I'm gonna send it again. I'm gonna send it again. I'm gonna send it again, right? And then I'm gonna get the information. Okay. Okay, now really, really quickly, I'm able to create a mock-up of the information that I might be receiving in my application. Right, with the user ID, I'm not even connected to a database, and it's generating an ID for me so that I can test out in my front end, so that I can test out here on the server, and I can do different things with the data. The password already looks like it's been hashed, but let's say it hasn't been hashed. You can use bcrypt to practice hashing it, right? All of these cool things that you can do. And notice I did not take the time to come in here and try to change this user every single time and take my precious developer time, right, to do that, when I could have done it like this so I can test certain things out. Okay. And this is not being saved in a database. Really good question, Christian. This is being saved as an array, which means it gets deleted. The minute I refresh the server, it's gone bye-bye forever, never seeing it again. Right. And so that's why databases become important, because databases, even though your server shuts down, something restarts, electricity goes off for whatever reason, whatever may happen, the data will be saved in the database, and you'll just receive that data once again whenever everything is able to get power again and it restarts. Okay. Essentially, that was the lesson for today. The assignment for today is for you guys to actually get to play with this and be able to create these routes that can get users and want to create a user. Okay, nothing too crazy. So that being said, I want to see if there's any questions that we may have. I know there might be a lot of questions. I know we covered a few things, so I want to see how you guys are feeling. Give me some ones and zeros in the chat. See how you guys are feeling, and of course, raise your hand, ask some questions so we can cover that. Nice, see a lot of ones. Very cool. Nice. All right. So let's go ahead and get into those breakout rooms for everybody online. Just want to say thank you guys so much for being here. We'll see you guys next time. And for everybody here, let's go ahead and get started.